Welcome to the Becoming babyREADY podcast, your podcast for queer family planning. My name is Sam, and throughout this podcast, you'll hear me have conversations with professionals who work alongside people who want to start and grow their families, as well as parents of intentionally created families. Everyone I speak to identifies as being part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. This is your opportunity to learn answers to questions you didn't even know you had. Today's episode is unfolding a little bit differently. I'm not going to tell you the identity of the woman I'm speaking to protect herself and her husband, who's a trans man. We do have a fantastic conversation about how their family was created, the beautiful journey they've gone on to make the baby that they have now, who is 14 weeks old, and why and how they made the decisions that they did that served their family perfectly. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm speaking to someone that I had the opportunity to meet through the goodness of social media on Instagram. And for everyone's safety, we're going to maintain some anonymity here, but that doesn't change the dynamics of their story and how their family was created and the fact that they're a perfect fit for the Becoming babyREADY podcast. So welcome. Tell us what you can about your family.
So we are from the UK. My partner and I have been together for over a decade. My husband, he is a transgender man, and I am a cisgender female. We met over a decade ago, and we spent several years together as a lesbian couple before he came out. And then it took about 6 years for him to complete his transition. And we decided to start our family about 3 years ago. So that's when we started looking to, just researching really ways we could do it. And we didn't realize how many different ways there were that we could do it.
Right?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of different ways. And we did have a few roadblocks, but we eventually settled on using a private sperm donor, who we found through an app. And we have a 14-week-old little girl.
And how is that going so far? 14 weeks in? You
Amazing.
okay so far?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's great. It's so hard. It is honestly, when people say it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, it really is, but it's the most rewarding thing in the world. Like, she's just the best thing ever. Like, I just can't get enough of her. And I do really think, like, what was life without her? Like, I genuinely can't remember. Like, we've been together for over a decade, and what were we doing before we had the baby?
Right. Right.
Life is so different, but in the best way. So
yes, sleep you can have anytime, but you'll never get those newborn gurgles and snurfles and snuggles back. So you might as well enjoy them, right?
Yeah.
As you've alluded, there are a plethora of ways for those of us in the 2S LGBTQIA+ community to create our families.
Yeah.
How did the two of you make the decisions you did about how you created your family? Did you use RIVF? Did you use IVF? Did you use IUI? You said you've used a private donor.
Yeah.
How did you come to these decisions?
It was a long time in the sort of in discussion, because I'm 33, and until I was about 26, 27, I didn't want children at all. I was quite adamant I didn't want kids. It was going to be too complicated, wasn't really something that was on the agenda. And then I got into my late 20s, we married, and I thought, actually, do you know what? It probably will be quite nice. So we started to look into it, and it was massively overwhelming, in terms of the options that were available and the options that weren't available. At the time we were looking, I had a much higher body mass index, which means that on the NHS in England, you can't access certain fertility treatments, which is a bit ridiculous, because it's not, your fertility isn't always impacted by your weight anyway. And whilst that is the case a lot of the time, the funding is quite complex if you've got a transgender partner. So often couples like us are treated like a lesbian couple. So when you go to clinics, when you go to anywhere in the NHS, all of the materials are aimed at same-sex couples, female couples. So
Mm.
there isn't really any representation for couples like us. And a lot of GPs, doctors just don't understand it. So we decided to go private initially, worked out that that was going to be thousands and thousands of pounds, which if you've got that kind of money, that's fine. We weren't in a position where we were able to afford 20 plus £1,000 on treatment. And we kind of both felt like, why should we? Why should
Mm-hmm.
we pay that amount of money? Because I've got friends who have decided to have children, children that have resulted from casual relationships or serious relationships, and we have friends with donor children. And when we spoke to them, it was like, actually, yeah, I think looking for a donor is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did. I made the Instagram page when we started to research how we were going to have our baby. And it took us about 18 months, all told, to reach a conclusion of how we were going to have our baby.
Mm-hmm.
And to find our donor, we had one donor in the beginning. Unfortunately, the distance didn't work out for us. It was just too far from where we lived to keep visiting him. But we found somebody much closer to home, and he's amazing. Just a really selfless, lovely human being. And he's a gay man. So it was just a lot more comfortable. It was a comfortable fit for us because he's part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And we got on so well. And he really couldn't be a better fit for us if he tried. So that's what we decided to do in the end. And it worked out great.
That's fantastic. So now you've got this person in your life that has
Yeah.
come in to be a donor for this child.
Mhm.
And will they maintain a relationship with the child? Will you maintain a relationship with this donor, do you think?
Yeah. So when we were looking at using a donor, there were options for IVF, there was options to travel abroad, where treatment is a lot cheaper. But the donations abroad through clinics are completely anonymous forever. In the UK, the law is different, and when a child turns 18, they're able to contact their donor and get certain information. It was multiple personal reasons, but I grew up not knowing who my biological father was, and when I found that information out, I think it was quite damaging for me mentally. So
Mm-hmm.
going into it consciously knowing this is what we were choosing, we wanted to know who this guy was, what he looked like, what his characteristics were, his morals. A sheet of paper just wasn't going to do it for me. And that's fine if that's the way you want to do things.
Sure.
Totally respect it. Absolutely fine. And I understand why a lot of couples want anonymity with their donor, but it just wasn't something that if I'm going to carry this child, I want to know who 50% of their DNA is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we found him on an app called Just a Baby.
Oh.
Uh, and it's like Tinder. So
Oh,
it's like a dating thing, but it's for sperm donors. I mean, some of your listeners have probably heard of it. Um,
sure.
but yeah, it's called Just a Baby. I believe it was started by an Australian um, person looking for, obviously, what we were looking for. And there's profiles on there, and you can literally swipe left and right, match with people. And that's how we found. Well, that's how we found both our donors, actually. But you really have to be careful. You have to dig through some creeps, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some guys, unfortunately, that really are just in it to take advantage of people, and it is sad, but it's fairly easy to weed those people out.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some genuinely beautiful human beings out there that don't want 500 children, that don't prolifically donate for, self gain. It's completely selfless, and they just want to help other people have a family. And so when we found our donor, who we used for our daughter, who gave us our daughter, um, we clicked with him instantly. And I think it's just like, you just know. It is kind of a bit like dating. You're looking for
For
somebody
sure,
to
it would be.
father your child, really, biologically. So but he's happy with the arrangement. It's casual. We have a relationship with him via WhatsApp. It's extremely casual. We just sort of check in here and there. He hasn't met our daughter. He doesn't he said he doesn't mind, it's up to us. If we wanted her to meet him, that would be fine. As it stands at the moment, she will know she's donor conceived. She will be brought up knowing she's donor conceived. And then if she chooses to want to meet him, that's fine. And we'll be happy to introduce them when she's a bit older and can sort of understand what's
Mm-hmm.
going on. But yeah, he's open to anything that he basically is happy for us to do it how we want to do it, really.
Right. It is interesting that you say that she's going to know she was donor conceived. I
Yeah.
mean, in our world, when it's too obviously to lesbians or
Yeah.
to gay men,
Uh-huh.
then you can't get past the fact that with
No.
your children that there was going to be a donor bit needed somewhere.
Hmm.
But when you are growing up in a heterosexual presenting couple, as your
Yeah.
daughter is going to do,
Yes.
then it's that's a totally different dynamic again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because
Completely.
you don't necessarily, how much do you tell with tell your child, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So we discussed it at length before we decided to try to get pregnant. And we both decided that we would be most comfortable with any children resulting from donations to know where they came from, um, rather than them find out through other means, or
Mhm.
because my husband is out socially to most of our friends and to family.
Mhm.
As I said, we spent several years as a lesbian couple, so most
Right.
people saw him through his transition.
Right.
Um, but at work and things like that, he's just himself, and so nobody knows, and so
Right.
it's not relevant to them, right?
Right.
So what we have decided to do is we will teach her as she grows up, age appropriate. We've got books for when she's smaller, how different families are made, but we want her to be raised in the LGBT community anyway. So when she comes into our community, all of our friends um, are queer or gay, and she's going to be around so many different types of people.
Right.
Being donor conceived isn't going to be weird for her. It's not going to
Mhm.
be different. It's not going to be, strange. She's going to grow up with friends who are also donor conceived.
Right.
Um, but we decided to do it this way because um, I think personally, and this isn't to sort of slate how anybody else goes about their lives, and I understand, especially with trans people and trans men in particular, you can't always have your children know straight away or at all for safety if you're stealth and nobody knows.
Mhm.
um I can understand, but for us morally it didn't sit right, telling her that she was biologically related her whole life and then just dropping this bomb on her later on. It's just not
Right.
fair. Like,
Right.
we didn't view that as fair. So to sort of introduce it from very young and from the beginning as something that's incredibly normal, which it is, this guy just helped us out.
Mhm.
Men have seeds and daddy didn't have any, that kind of,
Yep.
age appropriate as she gets older, just so when she's got questions, we can answer them,
Right.
basically. We
And
didn't want to say he was just a number on a sheet of paper.
right. And she will have questions potentially at some point, but at the same time, as you say, this is going to be normal for her as she's growing up. So
Yeah,
it's not, the questions probably won't be as as big as they
yeah,
might be if, she had no idea.
yeah, of course. And
Right,
I
and then
think
find out.
because of my own personal situation with my biological father, I was raised by somebody I'm not related to, and he, great dad. I call him dad. He's, gave me a wet. My wedding is that my biological dad's not in the picture. That's fine. Now as an adult, but as a teenager, as a young adult, it was like, well, who am I? I don't know who I
Right,
am. I want to find who I am. And we're seeing more and more now. We have LGBT friends who've had children that are in their teens, and they want to know who their biological parent is. And so they're looking, and they've got
right,
35, 36 siblings.
right,
It's a lot. And even though clinics are regulated, it's actually not as regulated as you'd think it is,
right,
for us. And so keeping it, we know, he could have as many children as he wanted, our donor. We would not
right.
know, but
Sure.
we trust him. We do trust him. And we know that he has another family that he's helped. They haven't had their baby yet. She's still pregnant. But she's also got my contact details because our children will be related. And so that's the sort of relationship we wanted.
Right.
We wanted traceability,
Mhm.
and, she's not going to grow up and accidentally sleep with or marry a brother,
Right.
or a sister, or a sister.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. You're right. It is interesting in this day and age with so many of the DNA testing companies
Yes.
that are out there.
Yeah.
It is surprising that there are places that still assure or promise anonymity when really
Yeah.
I wonder if that's actually a
And
possibility.
this was another thing as well. In the UK, obviously, as I said, the children can have access from 18 to any information that the clinic holds. That's if that donor has updated his details, if he's moved or anything like that. Um, but if you go abroad and it's completely anonymous, and then your child wants to look, I personally couldn't stop her from doing that, even if we had conceived abroad in Prague or wherever in Europe. And I would want to help her, but that guy who donated didn't agree to that. And so am I then crossing the line morally, violating his privacy?
Right.
It's a bit of a sketchy area. So
Hmm.
there's so many different questions that conceiving your child alternatively raise anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but we wanted to sort of keep it as straightforward as we could, really, as if we'd done it on our own.
Sure, absolutely. And to be fair, I mean, if he's decided he doesn't want to be found, then there's a good chance in 18 years he's still not going to want to be found.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
just because you have the means to find him
Mm,
doesn't mean that you're going to have a positive, warm, welcoming reception, right? So you want to
exactly.
save that heartache too.
Absolutely. That was something that we'd spoke about in depth because um, initially I wasn't comfortable using a private donor. I wasn't sure how we would go about it physically. I wouldn't sleep with the donor, but um,
Right.
I didn't know how we were going to physically go and pick up any sperm. I was like, how do you even do that? So it was like joining Instagram was where we found the most support and the most, I try to help other couples now, and they're like, but how are you arranging that,
Yeah.
um, and it is a lot of trust, and it is a lot of, everyone's like, oh, what if he has STIs, what if he's, like, well, I really really hope that he doesn't.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee he doesn't, but I really
Right.
hope that he doesn't. And we were extremely lucky, and he's very honest and open with us, but it can be sticky legally. It really
Hmm.
can be sticky legally if you're not married and things like that. It can be a bit difficult. Um, but I think it is what it comes down to at the end is absolutely personal choice. You can look at all the different ways to create your family, and the way that you choose is going to be the right way for you.
Hmm.
We'd looked into adoption first. It was my first choice. I didn't want to be pregnant. I didn't enjoy being pregnant. I
Hmm.
really did not like it. Um, but we looked into adoption first, and one agency out of the five we spoke to said to me, if there is 1% chance that you might want your own baby biologically, do that first. And I sort of was like, oh, I can't 100% say I don't. And
Right.
there was that little bit of, oh, maybe I would. And obviously we chose to. And
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that adoption's ruled out in the future at all. It's something that we both really, really would love to do. Um, but that's one thing I would say to anybody considering, make sure you
Hmm.
know if you want biological children, if you're able to have them, to do that first.
Hmm.
It's a lot easier to integrate children into a family that's already established. And yeah, even if it is absolutely your first priority, which it was for me,
Hmm.
if you want to have a baby from your body, do that first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's a variety of reasons that can fall into that too, right? I mean, not the least of which is the younger we have our children, the better the likelihood is that they will have healthy outcomes and things like that, because
Yeah.
they keep telling us as forever from the moment that we hit our first menstrual cycle, you know, when you get to a certain age, you're going to be too old or
Yeah.
something will be wrong or whatever. So I mean, that part does make sense too.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
And adoption's not fast. Like
Oh,
it's
it's
not a,
not
I'm going to
fast.
decide I want a baby and
No, and I know the processes that are in place are there for a reason. Absolutely understand why
yeah.
children have to be placed extremely carefully for a variety of reasons. But when it's your only option, I have friends where it is their only option, especially with gay men.
Hmm.
Surrogacy in this country is legal, but you can't pay a surrogate a set amount or a set fee.
Right.
So you can only sort of cover her expenses. And there aren't a lot of women available to do that. And so adoption is their only option. And it takes years. It really does take such a long, long, long time, which is heartbreaking because there's so many children just desperate for a family. And I've
Right.
got friends that I'm like, oh, they'd be great parents. But it's invasive. It's really quite invasive.
Yeah.
Um, so much so that finding a stranger to have a baby with was actually the least invasive option for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Once you figure out how to get what he's got and get it
Mm.
into you,
Yep.
that's the tricky part. Hold on for just a moment. We'll be right back. You know about babyREADY because you're listening to this podcast, so you know that we are all about queer family planning and helping you have the family of your dreams. But did you know that we don't abandon you once your baby arrives? We actually offer parenting coaching as well, and that's not just for the newborn phase, although we are there for that, but it's through toddlerhood and young children, tweens, and even through the teen years. When you need someone unbiased to lend an ear so that they can hear where your struggles truly are and help you come up with a path and a plan that feels truly right for you and your individual family, don't hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to be there for you. Visit us at www.babyready.info for more information. Now, in Canada, we have to do, if we're going through a fertility process, we have to have implications counseling, it's called. Do you have such a thing there? And when you first
Yeah.
started your process, was that something that you were encouraged to investigate?
It was yes. So initially, when we were looking at IVF, because of the cost and everything, it was a whole journey coming to the conclusion we weren't going to do that. But I actually went to donate my eggs because
Okay.
there's a scheme here where you can donate your eggs and you get a free cycle of IVF. And so I went to have all the tests done and things like that. And they were like, yeah, signed off as an egg donor. You have to have implications counselling because obviously any resulting children could come and find you, which I was totally fine with.
Mhm.
I was very much of the mindset, if I'm willing to accept a donation, why would I not be willing to give one away? And
Sure.
even though it's a lot harder for me physically to give my eggs away,
Yeah.
um, it just felt like a nice thing to do.
Hmm.
And if it means that somebody else can become a parent and wouldn't have otherwise been able to, all the better. We ended up not going ahead with that because I fell pregnant.
Mm.
But we were still trying. The clinic knew we were still trying. But yes, you do have to have implications counselling, whether you donate or whether, as I understand it anyway, whether you donate or whether you are receiving a donation through a clinic, they will always offer you implications counselling because a lot of people
Hmm.
don't know the ins and outs. They're just like, I'll just get some sperm, I'll just get some eggs, and
Hmm.
don't really think beyond that. So yeah, that is offered. We never ended up doing it, but
Right.
yeah, it is offered as far as I know.
You can't speak for your husband, obviously, who is, I presume, at work while we're having this
He's
conversation.
not. He's downstairs with the baby.
Oh, is
Yeah.
he? But how was his journey through the process as a non-bio parent, knowing that there wouldn't be a biologic connection to this baby?
Yeah.
Did he have to navigate any emotions around that, or was that sort of like, no, I know that's the case, I'm good?
Yeah, I think in terms of the child not being biologically related, no, that didn't bother him at all because it's always been the case. We both have a uterus, and
Mhm.
so we're never going to be able to make a child between us. And because we always knew that, it was always going to be one of these different ways that we were going to create a family, should we choose to have one. I think the hardest thing for him was probably coming to terms with the fact that the man's meant to bring the sperm, and he
Right.
couldn't. And
Right.
so that for him was just a personal issue. It wasn't long lasting. He didn't feel hugely about it. It was just, I think when we discussed it, it was more of a disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
I feel male, I am male, I'm fully transitioned, and we've got to go through all of this because of me. And I was like, but it isn't because of you.
Right.
Uh, we're both in this. I've
Mm-hmm.
chose to be with you. Like, I love you. It's not, it's not because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have to work harder for your family, you have a different appreciation. You really do.
Oh, I think that that's very true. And I think that that's something that a lot of the research is really showing of queer created families,
Mm.
just the different emotional states, which isn't to say that there isn't frustration, there isn't challenges that it doesn't get to you after you've been up 3 nights in a row with little to
Yes.
no sleep. Like all
Yeah,
of these kinds of things do still happen, but
absolutely.
the overall sort of sense of calm and peace and understanding that can come from a family that you really worked hard to
Really
create.
worked hard for.
Yeah, I think
And
that
I
that's
think
different.
off the back of him feeling like that, and obviously a lot of reassurance from me, and um, just just realizing that it's not his fault in the slightest. Like I said to him over and over, it's the same from the beginning. You did not choose to be transgender. Who
Hmm.
would choose to go through that? Like, oh, I know what I'll do. Put
Right.
myself through years of hormone therapy and surgeries. That'll be great. It's a necessity. It isn't something that you're like,
Yeah.
Um, off the back of that, it was frustration that there was so many people in the world that could just fall pregnant instantly. I
Right.
think if you're put in a position of social infertility, which is what we were put into, um, social infertility being obviously that you have to create your family through IVF or other methods, when you don't necessarily have a reproductive health issue.
Right.
Um, he found it quite frustrating. I think that there are a lot of people who didn't even necessarily want extra children, that
Hmm.
could just fall pregnant without difficulty.
Hmm.
There are people that don't look after their children. He previously was in a healthcare background. He see a lot of children that were treated badly, and from that comes some serious, emotions around it being incredibly unfair, not
Right.
just for us because we can't have our family easy, but for the children that are being made sort of willy-nilly and no thought put into it,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that cisgender couples or hetero couples don't have issues. Absolutely they do. There's, infertility is a huge issue for lots of different people from different backgrounds, but in our community
Hmm.
it's just not it's not discussed as widely as it should be. We're not represented as
Hmm.
as big as we should be,
Hmm.
and particularly transgender men, whether they're choosing to have a family the way we did, using a donor, privately or through a clinic, or if they're choosing to carry their babies, there
Right.
is no support whatsoever, none. Carrying a child for my husband was absolutely never going to happen. It's far too complex. It's why we didn't do reciprocal IVF either. If you're a
Hmm.
trans man, you have to come off hormones, you have to have menstrual
Yep.
cycles. It's just this whole,
Hmm.
it's very, very, very difficult mentally. And we know people who have done it, and we know people who have successfully carried their own children. And it's incredible. They're amazing parents.
Hmm.
And they have to go through so much physically and mentally to get to that point. It just wasn't something he was ever prepared to do. But these are the things that other people outside of the community don't realize what
Hmm.
we go through, really,
Right. Right.
and the pain that comes with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a lot of cases or situations, I shouldn't say cases because that makes it sound very clinical, but there are situations where there are lots of trans men who carry their own children,
Yeah.
but that's by virtue of sometimes as much as anything else, them being with another male partner, perhaps they're in a
Yeah.
gay relationship or they're single and they still want to be a parent. So
Yeah,
there isn't another uterus available for them to create a family.
absolutely. That is absolutely correct. And it's um not always the case. We have many trans friends who, have, especially through Instagram, I've met so many different trans men who have had their own babies, and it's beautiful, and isn't something I had any understanding of previously.
Hmm.
Um, the media will represent trans men carrying their babies in such a negative way, especially in this country. If it gets into the media, it won't be
Mm.
positive. We know several trans men who feel like it's their only option
Hmm.
because there isn't any. Who else's uterus are you going to use? If
Yeah.
you don't have a female partner that has a uterus,
Hmm.
or she can't or won't carry, or you're gay, or there's so many different. Then your only option is to use your own uterus if
Hmm.
that's what you really, really, really want. And for a lot of guys, it is their only option.
Hmm.
But there's no support in clinics, no support in hospitals. There's no protection in
Hmm.
hospitals either. Um, it's quite scary, really, that there isn't additional provisions for transgender men that are birthing their own babies. It can be quite triggering to be on a all-female ward, hugely
Yeah.
triggering. You can see and hear things that you don't necessarily want to see and hear. And a lot of people, especially older generations that do work in healthcare, older doctors, and they just don't understand. There
Hmm.
isn't any training. There's no book for that. So
No. And they're
they
not
really
interested
do.
in learning either.
No, not at all. A lot of the time, they're really, really not. And so I think they have an even greater fight on their hands. We are
Hmm.
so lucky. We have two uteruses to choose from. My husband was never gonna, but
Right.
at least we have that option, you know.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and I didn't want to carry, but I did. And I'm
Are
glad I did. I'm very glad
you
I
glad
did.
you did? Good, good. How was your experience birthing your daughter?
Amazing.
With the hospital and
Yeah.
everyone, with the dynamics of your relationship. I know your husband is out everywhere, he except with work and things like that, but and presumably he's able to do that because he's male passing. He very much
Yes.
looks like a man,
Yes, definitely.
and so that sort of perhaps makes things a little bit easier. But in the hospital, when you're working around with people and dealing intimately with people
Yes.
who don't know your family dynamics or anything
Mhm.
else, how was that journey for you?
So when we had midwife or health visitor appointments, anything like that through my pregnancy, I had a couple of health issues with my pregnancy. Um, I won't mention them just in case it does does out us in
Mhm.
any way, but I had extra appointments and scans basically. And they do ask quite a lot of in-depth questions about the biological father's side. And so it would be me usually. It's like, you
Mhm.
don't need to, the baby's donor conceived.
Mhm.
He's a Caucasian male. That's all you need to know. And they're like, oh, okay, no problem. And we didn't come up against any adversity. Nobody was rude. Everybody was very accepting. And oh, okay, then that's fine. When we went into hospital to birth our baby, I had a planned cesarean section. When we went into hospital to birth our baby, nobody knew and they didn't need to. It was
Right.
just, here's mum, she's having the baby. Here's dad, he's not having the baby.
Yeah.
And so I think that experience for him was quite uplifting because it's like being at work. People don't know that he's transgender. He's just him. And
Yeah.
so that's all he's ever wanted. And
Yeah.
the assumption that, oh, you're dad. Yeah, I'm dad. He is dad. Of course he is. He's raising our child. But
Right.
they just assume he's biologically related. And so you
Right.
don't need to say anything.
Yeah. Hmm. I think that that's fantastic, and that's how it should be. Whether or not he's male passing or not,
Yeah.
it should just be these two people are coming in to
Yeah.
have a baby, and they deserve for us to treat them with
Yeah.
nothing but dignity and respect. But
Completely.
it isn't always that way,
No, it isn't.
unfortunately. Are there any words of caution that you would share with members of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community when it comes to thinking about starting to create a family for themselves or through the journey?
Do your research and reach out to people in similar situations if you're able to,
Mm.
because that was so useful for us. It
Hmm.
really felt like a minefield in the beginning. It is mind blowing. It really is. When you look at, there's so many different ways to make your family. It can be all consuming, and it becomes, I was obsessed. I was just constantly, but if you're going whichever way you're going about it, just make sure it's absolutely what you want to do in your heart. And if you're going the way we went and you're using a private donor, be extremely careful. Don't go into anyone's house. Don't invite anyone to your house. Meet in a public place, as public as you can, and ask for sexual health checks. A lot of reliable donors will provide
Hmm.
certification to show that they've had certain tests done, and well, they should anyway,
Hmm.
and ours did. And just make sure really that you keep your communication open if you have a partner. If you're not going solo, then make sure you're communicating. And if even if you are solo parenting, just make sure that you're communicating with everyone around you about how you're feeling,
Hmm.
because it really does take a toll on you mentally.
Hmm.
And I don't think you realize it's going to. I definitely didn't.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it does. It does all the way through the process, right? There are ups and downs and peaks and valleys for emotions, and because there's so much that's unknown.
Yeah, there really is. And because, as I mentioned, it's social infertility, so you don't even necessarily have fertility problems. I mean, I have
Mhm.
polycystic ovaries. It can sometimes be an issue to get pregnant. It took us 9 cycles, which is totally normal. It
Mhm.
can take up to a year if you're having regular sex as a heterosexual couple. So for us, we were very, very lucky. It worked within the first year, but it doesn't always. And so you don't just have the social infertility aspect, you can fall into actual fertility issues. And even still, if you're having IVF, it's not guaranteed to work.
No.
And even using a donor, month after month, it's hard.
Hmm.
Negative, 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 negative.
Yeah,
It does take its toll. It does.
it absolutely does. That's one of the hardest parts of working in this industry is just watching the sadness for
Mm,
people who just want to become parents
yeah.
and to see that not happening, it's heartbreaking.
And because it's such a basic human thing to do, to
Mhm.
have a
Yes.
family, by nature we are, we're programmed to do that. And so when you come to a point in your life where, like I said, I never imagined myself having children ever.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden it was like someone literally flipped a switch and I was like, no, this is something I would like to do. And then it was, this is something I'm going to do. And then it's like, I'm gonna have this. It's like,
Yep.
it became, it was like someone had lit a fire in me, and it was like, I'm not going to stop until I've got my family. And
Right.
seeing other people struggle is really hard, especially with the relationships you form through social media, through talking to other people, and within your community and within your social circle.
Right.
You you've likely to have been on the other side of it. I've been that person that cried. I've been that person who's like, oh, everyone's pregnant except me. I've been
Hmm.
that person that I'm so desperate to have my family. When will it be my turn?
Hmm.
And so seeing other people go through that is hard, but
Yeah.
equally seeing them succeed is incredible. It is
Yeah.
just the best feeling. And when you've got a friend or somebody who, oh, I'm pregnant, and you're like, oh, finally, or we've been
Hmm.
accepted for adopting, panels agreed to, it's just the most incredible feeling, seeing other people succeed in having their families as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's incredible. Are there things that we haven't talked about that you were hoping to talk about today?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I'm quite open. If you've got anything else to ask me, I don't mind. I'll tell you whatever you need to know. But no, I don't think so, really.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the question then. Do you think that you would carry again, or are you one and done and then you'll look at adoption? Or is it still too soon to tell whether or not that would be something you would consider?
I honestly don't know. At
Yeah.
this point, I'm like, obviously I'm only 14 weeks postpartum anyway. My pregnancy was genuinely horrific. I suffered
Right.
mentally really badly. I had to give up work early. It was just a really hard time for me mentally and physically. But my birth was transformative. It was incredible. And having our baby is like, oh, it's just so life changing. You think,
Hmm.
I love my siblings. I'd love for her to have a sibling. Not sure if I'm prepared to go for it again yet. I don't know if I can do it
Fair
again.
enough.
Even just down to cycle tracking and things like cycle tracking is ugh, it's
Yeah,
just, I peed on so many sticks. I don't, don't
it's
even know
fair.
how many.
Fair.
There's
And
a
it's
lot.
that much harder when you've got PCOS
It is,
to
yeah.
cycle track, for sure.
Yeah, we used an Ovusense monitor. It's
Hmm.
worn internally, and it measures your body temperature. And because I've got PCOS, it can vary month to month. I'm not going to ovulate on day 14. It might be day 21 or day 28, and my
Yeah.
period will be 3 weeks late. Or using the Ovusense monitor was so helpful because it gave us a visual insight on what was happening inside my body.
Hmm.
And I actually, if that was correct, which it was every month anyway, I ovulated. My egg was released like 5 days after my donation, so there was
Mm.
a very healthy, strong sperm weight in there.
Yep,
Yeah, so I
absolutely.
not actually ovulated late, and because you're guessing the whole
Right,
time you're trying to conceive, you are just guessing. So
right,
yeah, it was a journey, but whether or not we will do it again, I don't know. We would love to adopt in the future. That
right.
is something we'd love to do, regardless of whether we have another biological child. Adoption is something we absolutely want to do.
And would you do that through the public system or a private system?
Um, we we have local councils that can arrange adoptions, and we've been in contact with our local council. Um, it feels a little bit less personal than
Hmm.
privately. There are some organisations that are absolutely incredible, and really go above and beyond for you. And you can also do foster to adopt. So you can
Hmm.
become foster carers and then foster smaller children with a view to eventually adopting them should that become an option. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go down, but we would probably go through private, I
Hmm.
think.
Well, my fingers are crossed for you that that works successfully for you and that that works smoothly as ultimately, to be fair, how the conception ended up happening for you.
Yeah.
The pregnancy, not so much, I get that, but like you say, only 9 months, which when you're in those 9 months is gutting every month when it isn't a positive pregnancy test, but it could be and often is much longer.
Mm.
So, yay, I'm excited to see what keeps coming up
Yeah.
for you and keeping in touch and watching your family grow and thrive. And
Yeah. Thank you.
what's your, I know she's only 14 weeks, but there's got to be a favorite part so far. What is your very favorite part of parenting this sweet girl?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Um, I think it's just the way she's completed us, our family.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
it just feels so natural. And the favorite part's got to be just watching her grow, seeing
Mhm.
her change and seeing her thrive and seeing it. I know that's because of the love that we're pouring into it.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's just the most incredible thing. So yeah, just loving her every day. It's got to be the best bit.
That's that's a pretty great bit, to be fair. That's a pretty great bit. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and sharing your story for everyone to learn and grow from so that they can create the families of their dreams.
You're so welcome. I hope it helps.
Absolutely, it helps. Thank you for joining me today on the Becoming Baby Ready podcast. If you have a story that you'd like to share, or you know someone who might, if you're a professional who works in the capacity of helping people start and grow their families, and you identify as being a part of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community yourself, then please don't hesitate to reach out. We always have room for more stories to share, and there's always more learning to do.